Hello, welcome and thank you for visiting the Open Leadership channel. My name is Michael Breeze, and on this video I'm going to complete the content of the Learn, Plan, Act cycle, or the growth engine as it's sometimes called. I started it in the previous video with the section about the Learn step in the cycle, and on this video we'll cover the Plan and Act steps in it. Now, I hope you find the video useful, and do stay until the end to see how you can access more free resources. Now, if you haven't subscribed yet, you risk missing out on all of the content, every part of the content of the open leadership approach, the tools, the model, the skills, the insights that will help you become an open leader. And also, if you do subscribe, it helps me to carry on making the free content for those who need it or want it. So if you could, please do. Now, as I said in the previous video, that was video number 8, Learn to Win. This model is foundational in its nature. It is the Learn, Plan, Act model. It underpins a number of the tools that I'll share in later videos, so it's foundational in that sense. It underpins any amount of the stuff we're going to cover later on. And it's a way, the Learn, Plan, Act cycle is a way of thinking and acting in many areas of organizational life and life in general. So it's also foundational in that sense as well. Now, in the previous video, I covered the learn stage of the cycle and stressed its importance. I suggested that we need to attend to what we know or what we need to learn before we set about planning for activity. So if you haven't watched that video yet, I strongly recommend that you do so before watching this one, so that it makes complete sense and you get the complete benefit. But of course, having said that the learn step is the most important in my view, and it definitely is, it will mean nothing if you don't now exploit the learning, exploit the step fully by building a good plan in the plan stage. As Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of the USA, is credited with saying, "Failing to plan is planning to fail." Now, when I use this quote, or discuss the underlying principles of it when I'm coaching or consulting with clients, most leaders will nod sagely and declare their understanding and their belief in this obvious truth that to fail to plan is to plan to fail. And yet, in so many of the situations that I'm working with these clients in, it is less than optimal planning that has led to the very problems or issues that they're grappling with at that point. Now, it's true that when we plan something for the first time, or in circumstances that we've never faced before, there might need to be a lot of forecasting and estimating for the lack of hard data and past experience. So fair enough, planning's difficult at that point. Now, of course, if we've completed the learn step well and fully, as shown in the previous video, some of that challenge should have been mitigated to some degree. But that challenge of doing things for the first time and needing that sadly for many organizations, that forecasting, estimating process, less diplomatically called guessing, seems to continue from numerous cycles of planning, because the plan didn't embrace the learnings from past experience of the people that did the plan, or their teams, or other sources. Now, we will cover in detail the tools, techniques and skills of good planning in a later video. Now, if that's not available when you view this one and you need to access that knowledge now, you could refer to chapter 7 of my book, Stepping Up, How to Be Great in Your First or Next Leadership Role. The details, it's available on Amazon, and the link is in the description below. But otherwise, the video will be coming out in due course. But in the meantime, before that video, this video is aimed at establish some of the key principles within this overall Learn, Plan, Act cycle that will help you to succeed in the plan step. And these principles are once again grounded in the foundations of the leadership purpose that was offered in the mini-series earlier in this channel, videos 5 to 5.3 on leadership purpose. Now, I'm sure you've watched those videos, but as a reminder, I offered a leadership purpose for the open leadership approach, which was to help our teams succeed whilst developing them as individuals and as teams. And to turn that purpose into focus, into action, I covered 3 elements that were needed for success, which were to connect your team, to engage your team, and to grow your team. Now, when you're planning when you're in the planning activity, in the planning step of this cycle, planning work that your team will execute, there are few better opportunities to live this leadership purpose. As you approach a plan and you look to get your team to fully embrace it, you might ask yourself the following questions in the context of your leadership purpose. First of all, to help your team connect, you could ask, do I fully understand how this work, how this plan we're about to build, how the objective of it connects to and supports the overall plan for the organization, its strategy, the big why, and also for my area? Can I explain effectively to my team how this all connects? So to connect them to why we're doing this and what it means in the bigger picture. Secondly, you could ask, is it clear who else this activity will impact or will need support from during the activity? And how do we connect with them and get their input? And how does your team do that, again, to build those connections for them? And lastly, perhaps you could ask, is my team on board and supportive of the intended outcomes? And if not, what needs to happen to achieve this? You want them to be, for that connection to the why and what they're doing, to be sufficient for them to feel on board with the challenge they're about to face. And if they're not, then as I say, how do you go about correcting that and building that connection? Then, secondly, to help your team engage with the plan and the work ahead, you might ask, how can we best ensure that the team's combined knowledge is used to develop a quality plan? A key part of that engagement process is to get what they know from the front line, from their daily activity with customers and the working processes of the day, get that knowledge, get that understanding in to start to engage them in the planning stage at least. And secondly, how will we make sure that everyone feels part of the action and is clear of their role in the plan? So as well as bringing them into for their input and engaging in that way, also making sure that they feel engaged and making sure that they feel part of the action. They understand their role and how they can play their part in the upcoming work. And lastly, you might ask, what's the best way to optimize your team's ownership of the results and establish a common sense of mission? So you've got their involvement, they're involved in the planning, they understand, they're connected to the mission and to the why. They're hopefully at that point they are wanting to be part of it, they're wanting to get a results, but it's figuring out the best way to optimize their ownership, starting to make them accountable for their actions, for the work they do and the results. And then lastly, in the section in the area of how to grow your team, you should ask yourself these questions. Is it possible to build into this plan that you're working on ways to give individuals in your team members, new experiences or accelerated learning by asking them to take responsibility for certain aspects of the work ahead that's perhaps new to them or at a level of responsibility or accountability they're not used to? Is there a good way to do that and build the growing process for your team into the plan itself? Now we'll cover this in greater depth in a later video under the heading of effective delegation. It's also in chapter 9 of my book, the book that I mentioned earlier, Stepping Up, How to Be Great in Your First or Next Leadership Role. So if you're in a hurry, but there will be a video coming out about how to manage effective delegation, and this business of growing your people through the way you delegate to them is a key component in that work. Secondly, you might ask, what is new in this activity and how can we ensure learning from engaging with it? So if you're working with new technology, you're working with a new type of client, you're working with anything that's new and different, how can you build into your plan ways to maximize the learning about this new experience for future use? Thirdly, in the area of growing your team, you could ask, do we need to do anything in advance in order to minimize the risk of failure? And if so, where can we access the required expertise? So this is about knowledge, this is about growing. Now, you will have considered this, hopefully, in the learn stage, but now is the time to plan to ensure that the learning process is baked into the plan. And lastly, a question you might ask is how often and when should you step back and review progress and correct course, and as part of that, capture lessons learned. A key element of learning lessons is to do them close to the action in terms of time and proximity, and capture the learning. What happened, why are we off course, and what have we learned from that, and distill that learning. And you need to just figure out how often in this particular plan you need to do that. It may be that you do nothing if it's a short work plan until after the work's completed. If you're talking about months of work, you want to build in cycles to try and capture that learning whilst you're course correcting and changing direction. Now, if you ask yourself and your team these questions, you'll not only be living your leadership purpose, as mentioned earlier, but you'll also give yourself and your team the best possible chance of success in the activity that you're planning. So, you've learned and you have planned, hopefully effectively, and all that's left to do now is to execute the plan, the act step in our cycle. The easy bit, right? I mean, you've got a good plan based on sound learnings. What can go wrong? Well, that depends. The challenge is that, except in the most simple of activities, no matter how good your plan might be, no matter how much good work you've done in the learn and plan cycle, the actual activity rarely plays out just as you envisaged it. As many great military minds have echoed over the centuries, no plan survives contact with the enemy. Now, I doubt that you're planning a military engagement, and if you are, this is definitely not the right video channel for you, so I would recommend going elsewhere. But the point is still valid. Any piece of work involving more than one person, and certainly when it engages with people who are out of your control and influence, that plan is vulnerable to variables that no planner, or even a team of planners, can foresee. Now, these unforeseen variables can range enormously. Obvious examples are changes in priorities. Maybe new priorities come along to your team and you have to change direction, so the plan gets put on the back burner. Maybe the organization just imposes new priorities on you and tells you to focus elsewhere. You might have an unexpected resource shortage for one reason or another, for perhaps similar reasons for the priority change. You may face changes in local or national legislation that make your plan inappropriate or irrelevant. An epidemic. I mean, as I record this, in the UK, we're facing what looks like wave 3 of COVID, about to spread through the country again. So these things can come out of the blue, and of course, it doesn't take something as big as COVID. If you get a heavy flu epidemic or some other bug run through, and suddenly your resources are diminished, that can have an impact. Maybe a key team member's child is suddenly getting sick just when a critical event is due to be completed by that person who's got perhaps unique levels of knowledge or skills in that particular. You get the picture. There are any number of things that can drive you off your plan. And of course, the enemy turning up in greater numbers from a different direction, sooner, or with better weaponry than you expected. Now, if your learn and plan steps are being carried out well, you will hopefully minimize the number of unexpected events, and your readiness for them should be improved as well. Now, of course, to some degree, experience and time are great teachers here in this area of planning and being ready for unexpected events. As you build more plans and learn from more execution of those plans, you'll become aware of more things to consider as factors, as risks to possible barriers that when you plan. You'll just become intuitively more aware of those possibilities, and you'll build them into your thinking to some degree. But that is why mastering this cycle, the learn, plan, act cycle, and making it a habit to formalize learning and replanning each time is such a powerful thing to do. And one of the things you'll learn is that having mechanisms in place to make it easier to spot and respond to unexpected events or issues is a key part of what good execution, the act step, is all about. As a leader, good execution, the act step in our cycle, is not just about following the plan like a set of instructions as though you're building a flat pack piece of furniture. Rather, it's more about helping your team to stay focused on the goal, on the intended outcome, the results that you're trying to achieve, and then tracking progress and course correcting as required, and taking the learnings from that as you go. Now, the tools and techniques, the skills for this will be covered, as I say, in a later video. They're also available, as I say, in chapter 9 of my book. Again, if that video isn't available yet, and when you're viewing this one, chapter 9 of my book is the alternative. Now, in summary, learn, plan, act. It's a bit obvious, isn't it? I mean, we plan things, we do things, they go wrong, we learn from them. That's just what happens in everyday life, isn't it? I've heard this from leaders many times when I'm explaining this model to them and explaining the power of it to them. So often people just go, well, that's what we do all the time, isn't it? And truthfully, the learn, plan, act model is pretty simple to explain and to understand as a concept. And this apparent simplicity can cause leaders and organizations as a whole to be careless and not to pay much attention to the power of formalizing it, of making it a habit, of making it rigorous, embedding it, and making it a way of thinking and behaving in their organization and in their teams. And in my experience, organizations need a structured, conscious approach if they're to ensure that all involved continue to learn and grow as in an accelerated, focused, deliberate, conscious way, and minimize the risk at best of repeating the same mistake over and over again, and at worst, catastrophe. Now, a number of the upcoming videos on different tools and methods for leaders as we go forward, I'll show you how you can role model and embed the power of this model into your teams and to your organization and the way you work. And the first of these is the leadership of effective meetings, which will be the next little mini-series of videos. So hopefully you can see the essential and foundational nature of the growth engine, or learn, plan, act cycle. Now, I hope this video was useful and interesting. Let me know your thoughts and comments below. And also, please remember to subscribe to the channel if you would. Hit the reminder bell to receive notifications when this new content is coming out, because, as I say, it covers the whole of the open leadership approach free of charge on this channel. Now, you can get access to more free resources at www.openleadershipbase.com, including excerpts from my book there on that website. You can also join the Open Leadership Base forum through that website and get involved in conversations with me and other leaders and share experience, ask questions, as well as letting me know your thoughts about the content that you'd like to see there on that website or here on this channel in future videos. Now, as I say, if you are impatient for an overview of the whole of the open leadership approach, and you don't want to wait for the full video versions to arrive as I produce them, and I'm going to produce every week, so I'm trying to get through them as quickly as I can, you could alternatively buy my book, as I say, if you're in a hurry. Stepping Up, How to Be Great in Your First or Next Leadership Role, as I say, available on Amazon. The link is in the video description below. But do remember, I will be giving all the content away and more on this channel going forward. So it just remains for me to say thank you once more for visiting the Open Leadership channel, and see you next time.